In 1926, a philosopher named Soetsu Yanagi walked into a small farmhouse in rural Japan and stopped completely still. On a shelf, almost casually placed, was a ceramic bowl. It was not remarkable by any conventional measure. No elegant decoration. No fine craftsmanship. The clay was coarse, the glaze uneven, the shape slightly irregular. The product of a rural kiln made quickly by an anonymous potter for everyday use. Yanagi stood in front of it for a long time. Then he said, "This is the most beautiful thing I have seen all year." His companions were confused. They had spent the morning looking at antiques and masterworks, and Yanagi was moved by a bowl made by someone whose name no one remembered. But Yanagi had understood something that would take him decades to fully explain. The bowl was beautiful, not in spite of its imperfections. The imperfections were exactly why it was beautiful. That realization became the foundation of the Mingei movement, one of the most important ideas in the history of Japanese design. And today I want to use it to explore a question that seems simple, but runs very deep. Why does Japanese design embrace flaws? Why, in a culture famous for precision and discipline and meticulous craft, is imperfection not just tolerated but deliberately sought? The answer changes how you see everything, including possibly yourself. Let us start with Yanagi's insight. The bowl he found in that farmhouse was what the Japanese call Mingei, literally art of the people. Folk craft, objects made not by famous artists for wealthy collectors, but by ordinary craftspeople for ordinary daily use. Bowls and baskets and textiles and tools. Things made without the self-consciousness of fine art. Things made quickly, in volume, by people who had no particular interest in being remembered. Yanagi's claim, which shocked the art establishment of his time, was that these anonymous everyday objects were often more beautiful than the celebrated masterworks of acknowledged artists, not despite their ordinariness, because of it. The reason, he argued, was this: the folk craftsperson was not trying to be beautiful. They were trying to be useful. And in that freedom from self-consciousness, in the act of making something functional without ego, without the pressure of artistic ambition, a different kind of beauty emerged. Unguarded, honest. The beauty of something that simply is what it is. When an artist knows they are making art, Yanagi observed, something subtly changes. They begin to perform. The brushstroke becomes aware of itself. The glaze is applied with an eye toward how it will be judged. That self-consciousness becomes visible in the work. The folk craftsperson making a bowl to hold rice has no such problem. The bowl is not a statement. It is a bowl. And that freedom, the freedom of not trying, produces something. The most technically accomplished art often cannot full presence without pretense. This is the first principle of Japanese design that embraces flaws. The flaw is often the evidence of freedom from performance. The uneven glaze is the trace of a hand that was focused on the bowl, not on how the bowl would look to others. Now I want to talk about Shibui, a Japanese aesthetic concept that does not translate well into English, but that sits at the heart of Japanese design philosophy. Shibui describes a quality of austere, restrained, understated beauty. The word originally referred to the taste of an unripe, persimmon sharp, astringent, not immediately pleasant. Over centuries, it became an aesthetic term. Beauty that does not announce itself. Beauty that requires attention. Beauty that reveals itself slowly and deepens the longer you engage with it. Shibui is the opposite of what design culture in the West has often celebrated: the bold statement, the eye-catching surface, the immediate impact. Shibui resists the immediate. It withholds. It gives you something to discover rather than something to consume at a glance. And here is where flaws become central. A surface that is too smooth, too finished, too perfectly resolved cannot be Shibui. It gives you everything immediately. There is nothing left to find. The Shibui object has roughness, literal or tonal, that slows you down. That creates friction. That makes you look again and then again, each time finding something you had not noticed before. Think of the difference between a piece of music that is immediately catchy and one that is initially strange but rewards repeated listening. The first gives you everything on the first encounter. The second gives you more each time. The Shibui object works like the second kind of music. The flaw, the roughness, the not quite resolved element. These are what keep you engaged. They are the invitation to keep looking. Japanese architecture embodies this understanding in ways that are impossible to miss. Once you know what to look for, traditional Japanese buildings are made of wood, paper, bamboo, and stone materials that change visibly with time. Wood darkens and develops grain. Paper turns amber. Bamboo fades. Stone grows moss. These are not maintenance failures. They are the intended result. Japanese builders designed their buildings to age well, not to stay new. The contemporary architect Kengo Kuma embodies this. His buildings use natural materials cedar, bamboo, stone, knot, despite the fact that they will change over time, but because of it. A building that looks the same in 30 years, as it does on opening day in the Japanese tradition, has not yet earned its place in the landscape. Compare this to the dominant Western aesthetic. The glass and steel tower sealed against time. Clean, unchanging, permanent. Japanese design does not seal against time. It opens to it. The flaw is the record of time passing. And time in Japanese aesthetics is not the enemy of beauty. Time is the artist. There is a concept in Japanese ceramics called ji, the quality of the clay body itself. In Western ceramics, the clay is merely the structure supporting decoration. In Japanese ceramics, the ji is itself the aesthetic subject. The color, texture, the way clay absorbs or resists glaze, these are considered as beautiful as anything applied to the surface. This is why Japanese traditions celebrate naked clay left unglazed, showing its natural character. The flaw in the clay, the variation in color, the marks from firing, the irregularity from the potter's hands, these are not defects to be hidden. They are the material speaking its own language. What Japanese design understands in all these contexts is something that Western design has often tried to override: the difference between control and presence. Control produces objects that look exactly as intended, every element in its precise place, every surface resolved to the designer's specification. This is a form of mastery, and there is real value in it. But it produces objects that are ultimately about the designer's intention, not about the material's nature. Presence is what you get when material and maker have a conversation, rather than one dictating to the other. The potter who works with the clay rather than against it, who accepts what the clay is doing and responds to it, rather than forcing it into a predetermined form, produces something different from what either the potter or the clay could have produced alone. The imperfection in that object is not the potter's failure to fully control the material. It is the record of the conversation between them. This is why the Japanese aesthetic tradition values the handmade mark, the visible evidence of a human hand working with material so highly. The perfectly uniform machine-made object contains no such conversation. It is entirely controlled, entirely intentional, entirely predetermined. The handmade object contains the record of an encounter between a maker and a material, in a moment that cannot be replicated. The flaw is the proof of the encounter. The flaw is what makes it real. What does any of this mean for how you might live or work or create? I think the deepest implication is this: the drive to remove every imperfection from what you make, or from how you present yourself, or from how you live. That drive is not just unnecessary. It removes something essential. The imperfection in your work is the evidence that a real person made it. The roughness in your story, the parts where you struggled, where things did not resolve cleanly, where you made choices. You still are not sure about that. Roughness is the Shibui quality. It is the invitation to look closer. It is what makes you specific and real, rather than generic and smooth. Yanagi found beauty in the unnamed potter's bowl, because the bowl had no pretense. It was entirely itself. It did not try to be more than what it was. And in not trying, it became something that no amount of trying could have produced. That is what Japanese design knows about flaws. They are not the failure to achieve something. They are the evidence of honest presence, of a maker who was fully there, working with real material in real time without performing for an imaginary audience. The unnamed potter did not know anyone would remember that bowl. He made it anyway as well as he could and moved on. 100 years later, Yanagi could not stop looking at it. If this way of seeing the world speaks to you, follow this channel. There is more Japanese wisdom where this came from.